My family treated me like trash for 18 years while my brother was the golden child. They forced me to work and pay rent at 14. But when they kicked me out before finals, my grandparents revealed my parents stole my college fund and exposed them on social media. I'm 18 years old, I study art at an amazing university, and the truth is, I need to tell this story because what I lived through with my parents my entire life basically destroyed me inside for a long time, but it also made me the person I am today. I guess I should start from the beginning, even though there are moments that still hurt when I remember them, and others that simply make me feel relieved that I'm no longer part of that life. The thing is, I was always the failure child in my family, while my brother Marcus, who's 26 now, was the golden child who could do whatever he wanted without consequences. And when I say I was always treated differently, I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. One of my first clear memories, the kind that stays with you forever, was when I was like 5 years old at Christmas. My parents, who by the way are both college professors and supposedly should know something about raising children fairly, had put all the presents under the tree. It was just a little girl. Still believed in Santa and all that Christmas magic, and I saw this big present with my name on it. I got so excited that I ran toward it. But before I could even touch it, my father literally snatched it from my hands and said it was actually for Marcus because it was bigger and he needed it more. Can you believe it? It had my name written on it and everything, but it didn't matter. Marcus was like 13 at the time, and he didn't even care about the present, but my parents insisted it was for him. I cried so much that day that my grandparents, who were there and saw everything, left the house angry. Like a week later, this huge package arrived at my house. It was a beautiful wooden doghouse that my grandparents sent me, and from that day on, they became my real support system, the only people who truly loved me. The difference in treatment was so obvious that even I, being a kid, could see it perfectly. Marcus could do whatever he wanted, spend whatever he wanted, ask for whatever he wanted, and my parents would give it all to him without batting an eye. I, on the other hand, had to ask permission for everything, and most of the time the answer was no, because according to them, I needed to learn to be responsible and not waste the family's money. The money Marcus spent apparently didn't count as family money, I guess. My grandparents visited me often and always brought me things, made me feel special, asked about my drawings because from when I was little I loved art. And they were the only ones who really took interest in what I did or felt. When I was 13, things got worse. Much worse. Marcus had finished high school and was about to enter college, and my parents decided we needed to move to a bigger and more expensive house so he could have the perfect space while he studied. The thing is, the previous house was fine, like it wasn't a mansion, but we all had our space. But no, Marcus needed something better. So we moved to this super expensive neighborhood where the mortgage was ridiculously high, and it was all so the golden child would be comfortable. I had to share the bathroom with my parents, while Marcus had his own private bathroom. His room was twice the size of mine. He had his own living room type study area. It was absurd. For Marcus's birthday that year, I had been saving my allowance money, because they gave me a miserable allowance of like $20 a month while Marcus received hundreds, and I bought him a watch that cost me like $150. It was a nice watch. Nothing super fancy, but it looked good, and I was proud of having bought it with my own money. I wrapped it and gave it to him on his birthday, and you know what happened? My father opened it, saw the watch, and said it was too good for me to give to Marcus, that I had obviously stolen it or something, because there was no way I could pay for it. He took the watch away from me, accused me of being a liar in front of the whole family, and ended up giving it to Marcus, as if he had bought it. Marcus didn't even say anything. He just accepted the watch and went on with his day. I went to my room crying and called my grandparents, and they came to the house and made a huge scene with my parents. It was horrible. But everything got worse when I turned 14. That day, on my literal birthday, my parents sat down with me and told me I was old enough to start working and earning my own money. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. They told me I had 2 weeks to find a part-time job because from that moment on, I had to pay for my own things. My clothes, my school supplies, my food if I wanted something special, everything. Marcus still wasn't working, still received everything paid for, was still the family prince. But I, at 14 years old, had to work. I got a job at a coffee shop near school. I worked like 20 hours a week after classes and on weekends, and all my salary went to basic things that my parents refused to pay for. Me. My grandparents found out about this and got furious, like I had never seen them so angry. They went to the house and had a giant fight with my parents, told them it was child abuse. How could they think of making me work being a minor while Marcus lived like a king without lifting a finger? My parents basically told them to mind their own business and that this was how they raised their children. After that fight, my parents gave me an ultimatum that I still can't believe was real. Either I started paying them rent to live in the house, or I left. I was 14 years old. You know what I mean? 14 years old, and my parents were asking me for rent. So I started paying them $200 a month, which was almost everything I earned. While I was still in school, working, and trying to keep my grades high because art was the only thing that made me happy. Marcus, meanwhile, was in college living his best life. My parents paid him everything, the full tuition, his apartment, his car, his food, his outings, absolutely everything. He was studying something in business, I think, although he never really put much effort into it, truth be told. He got mediocre grades, but my parents didn't say anything to him, while they yelled at me if I got less than an A in any class. The pressure was constant, overwhelming, and the worst thing is that nobody except my grandparents seemed to notice how unfair everything was. When I was like 16, Marcus met a girl in college and fell head over heels in love. She seemed like a good person, honestly, and Marcus looked happy with her. They moved in together after she graduated, and everything seemed to be going well until they decided to get married. They went to Las Vegas and did a quickie wedding without telling anyone, and when my parents found out, they went crazy. They said the girl wasn't good enough for Marcus, that he had married too young, that she only wanted his money. Even though, ironically, Marcus didn't have his own money, everything was from my parents. They started constantly interfering in Marcus's relationship, calling his wife at all hours, criticizing every decision they made, telling Marcus to get divorced. It was intense, and I felt bad for him. Honestly. Because for the first time in his life, my parents weren't completely on his side. The marriage lasted like a year and a half before they got divorced, and Marcus came back to my parents' house completely devastated. And here comes the part that still makes my blood boil. I was 18 years old. I was in my last year of high school. There were like 2 weeks left until my final exams. Super important exams, because I needed good grades to get into the art college I wanted. I came home one day after work and my parents were waiting for me in the living room. They told me that Marcus needed my room because it was bigger and he was going through a difficult time after the divorce, and that I had to leave. Just like that, they were kicking me out of the house 2 weeks before my finals. They didn't even give me time to process the information. They told me I had until the weekend to pack my things and go. When I asked them where I was supposed to go, my mother said, "I don't know. With your grandparents, I suppose," as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I called my grandparents crying, and of course they told me to come live with them immediately. I packed everything I could in 2 suitcases, took my art supplies, which were the most important thing to me, and I left that same night. I didn't want to spend one more minute in that house. My grandparents received me with open arms. They prepared my favorite room in their house, the one I always used when I stayed with them as a child, and they told me this was my home now and forever. I did my final exams from my grandparents' house. I got excellent grades despite all the stress, and I applied to art college with the help of my grandmother who reviewed all my essays. Like 2 months after I moved in with my grandparents, my parents showed up at the door of the house on a Saturday morning. They looked desperate, like I had never seen them like that. My grandfather opened the door and they started asking him for money, that they urgently needed help with the house mortgage because they couldn't pay it. And you know why they couldn't pay it? Because I wasn't paying rent anymore. They had basically been using my money, the money a minor earned working after school, to pay part of their mortgage for the expensive house they bought for Marcus. My grandfather was shocked. My grandmother too, and they told them to get out of their house. My parents started begging, saying they were going to lose the house, that they needed help, but my grandparents closed the door in their faces. That night, my grandparents sat me down and told me something that changed everything. They told me they had planned to leave a pretty large inheritance to my parents when they died. It was like their life savings, but that they had decided to change the will. Now all that money was coming to me, and my parents weren't going to receive anything. They said that after years of seeing how they treated me, of seeing the favoritism toward Marcus, of seeing how they basically exploited me financially, they had made that decision. I cried so much. Like I couldn't believe that someone really loved me like that someone saw how unfair my life had been and wanted to do something about it. My parents found out about the change in the will like a week later because my grandparents decided to tell them directly. They came to the house again, this time yelling and furious. My father called me selfish, manipulative, said I had poisoned my grandparents against them. My mother cried and said I was destroying the family, that I was a terrible daughter, that after everything they had done for me, that's how I repaid them. I sat there listening to everything, and the only thing I thought was, what exactly did they do for me? Make me work since I was 14? Pay them rent being a minor? Be treated as a second-class citizen in my own house? My grandfather literally had to throw them out of the house because they didn't want to leave. Things got so much better after that. Like a month after living with my grandparents, I received my acceptance letter from the art college I wanted, the best one in the state, like it was my dream to study there. My grandparents were so proud. My grandmother cried with happiness, and my grandfather told me not to worry about anything, that they were going to pay my full tuition, my apartment near campus, everything. I couldn't believe my luck. I mean, it wasn't luck. It was that I finally had people in my life who truly supported me. I started planning my move to campus, imagining my life studying art, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy and excited about the future. Marcus called me like 2 weeks after I got accepted to college. We hadn't talked practically at all since I left the house, and honestly, I didn't feel like talking to him, but I answered because I was curious about what he wanted. He asked me for money. Just like that directly. Said he needed like $5,000 for I don't know what thing, and that he knew the grandparents were helping me financially. I stayed silent, processing the audacity. Honestly. And then I asked him why he didn't ask our parents if they had always given him everything. That's when he told me something that left me frozen. He told me that our parents had been the main reason for his divorce, that they hadn't stopped interfering in his marriage, talking badly about his wife to him, convincing him that she wasn't enough for him, until they basically destroyed the relationship. And now that he understood it and had confronted them about it, they had cut his financial support almost completely. They only gave him the basics to survive, but they didn't pay for all his things like before anymore. I got so angry in that moment, like all the accumulated rage from years came out. I told him how dare he ask me for money after years of seeing how our parents treated me and not saying or doing anything. I reminded him of all the times he received things that were mine, all the times they humiliated me while he watched in silence, all the times he could have been a real brother and chose not to be. I told him no, that I wasn't going to give him a penny, and that I didn't want to hear from him again. I hung up the phone and cried, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. It was like a liberation, you know? Like letting go of something I had been carrying for too long. Apparently, after that call, Marcus went to my parents and had a massive confrontation with them. I found out later from my grandparents that he yelled at them, that he told them everything they had done to me and to him, that he confronted them about the favoritism, the manipulation, everything. He told them they were alone now, because they had destroyed their family with their own hands. My parents tried to convince him that everything was my fault, that I was the bad one in the story, but Marcus didn't believe them anymore. He left the house and moved to a small apartment with a roommate, started working for real for the first time in his life, and cut contact almost completely with our parents. My parents lost the house like 3 months later. They couldn't pay the mortgage without my money and without being able to ask Marcus for more, and the bank took it away from them. They ended up moving to a small apartment in a low-income area, super different from the big expensive house they had bought to impress everyone. My grandparents told me that my parents tried to ask them for borrowed money several more times, but they flatly refused. They said my parents had made their bed and now they had to lie in it. You know what I mean? The thing is, my parents didn't stay quiet. Like 4 months after all this, my grandmother called me saying to check Facebook because my parents had posted something about me. I went in, and there it was. A long post from my mother, saying I was an ungrateful daughter, that I had manipulated my grandparents to give me money, that I was destroying the family, and worst of all, that I wasn't even my father's legitimate daughter. She literally called me an illegitimate daughter on social media, in front of all her family, her friends, her work colleagues. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Like I was shaking with rage and shock. But what happened next was incredible. The entire community turned to defend me. People who had known us since I was a child, neighbors, family, friends, even some of my parents' students. Everyone started commenting, defending me. They told stories of how they had seen me work since I was little, how they noticed the favoritism toward Marcus, how my grandparents were always my only defenders. My parents ended up deleting the post out of shame, but screenshots had already circulated everywhere. Their reputation was destroyed. Later, I discovered something else that made everything fit together in an even more horrible way. My grandparents told me that they had established an educational fund for me when I was born, a fund that my parents were supposedly supposed to use exclusively for my education. It was a significant amount, like enough to pay for a complete college education. But it turns out my parents used that money for their own things, to remodel their previous house, for the family trips they took every summer, for the luxuries they bought. They basically stole my educational fund and spent it on themselves. That's why later my grandparents decided to pay for college directly for me, because they knew that if they gave the money to my parents, it would never reach me. Everything started to make sense. Why I had always been lacking resources while they lived well. Why they forced me to work so young. Everything was because they had already spent the money that should have been mine. Marcus contacted me again like 6 months after all this drama. This time he didn't ask for money, he just wanted to talk. I agreed to meet him at a neutral coffee shop, not at my grandparents' house or near where our parents lived. He looked different. More mature, I guess. More tired, too. He apologized to me, cried while telling me how sorry he was, told me he had been a terrible brother, that he had been complicit in the abuse by staying quiet all those years. He told me his ex-wife had opened his eyes about many things, that she had seen how our parents manipulated him and tried to control him, and that when she pointed those things out to him, he started to see how they had treated me my whole life too. He told me he understood if I didn't want to forgive him, but that he wanted to try to be a real brother from now on, if I was willing to give to him the chance. The truth is, I thought a lot about that. Part of me was still angry with Marcus for everything, but another part understood that he had also been a victim of our parents in a certain way, just in a different form. They had turned him into someone dependent, incapable of fending for himself, someone who expected everything to come to him without effort. That's also a way of harming a child. You know what I mean? I decided to forgive him, not for him but for me, because carrying that resentment was weighing on me. I told him we could try to rebuild our relationship as siblings, but that it was going to take time, and that one of my conditions was that he also cut contact with our parents while they didn't acknowledge the harm they did. He told me he had already done that months ago, and that he had no intention of talking to them again until they really changed, although he doubted that would happen. Our parents made a few more attempts to contact me during the next year. Text messages saying they missed me, that they wanted to fix things, that family should be together, but never, not once, did they truly apologize to me. They never acknowledged what they did to me, never admitted the favoritism, never apologized for financially exploiting me being a minor. All their messages were always blaming me or my grandparents, or trying to make themselves the victims. I blocked them from everywhere after a while. I decided it wasn't worth maintaining even that minimal connection. Now, I'm 18. I'm in my first year of college studying art, something I love with all my heart, and I'm living the life I always wanted. My grades are excellent. I have real friends for the first time. People who value me for who I am. Marcus and I talk like once a month. We're rebuilding our relationship little by little, and recently he told me he's going to be a father. His girlfriend is pregnant and he's excited but also scared of repeating our parents' patterns. I told him the fact that he has that fear already makes him a better father than ours, because it means he's aware and wants to do it differently. My grandparents are still my biggest support. I go visit them every 2 weeks and we talk on the phone almost every day. My grandmother says she's proud of the woman I'm becoming, and my grandfather constantly tells me to never let anyone make me feel less than what I'm worth. I'm working on a collection of paintings for my advanced class, and I've already decided that when I have my first professional exhibition, I'm going to dedicate the entire collection to my grandparents because they truly saved me, gave me the opportunity to be who I am, and showed me what real unconditional love is. Sometimes I wonder what things would have been like if my parents had treated me differently, if they had loved me even half as much as they loved Marcus. But then I realized that maybe I wouldn't be where I am now. Maybe I wouldn't be so strong, so independent, so determined to create my own path. The pain I lived through made me resilient in a way I wouldn't have achieved otherwise. I wouldn't recommend it. Obviously, nobody should go through what I went through, but I found meaning in it somehow, I guess. I know that someday, probably when my grandparents are no longer here, I'm going to have to decide if I really want my parents out of my life forever. It's a heavy decision, you know? Because as much as they did to me, it's still hard to accept that your biological family simply doesn't love you the way they should. But for now, I'm at peace with my decision. I have a family that truly loves me. I have a bright future ahead of me, and I have the freedom to be myself without the constant weight of never being enough for someone. And honestly, that's more than many people have. So I feel grateful despite everything.